we just finished talking about the different parenting styles, and now we're going to talk about some of the child outcomes from those parenting styles. So children with authoritative parents, remember this is the best for most children most of the time. There's always going to be some variations. Some children won't do well in this. And again, this is only for Western cultures, specifically the United States. But in general, authoritative parents have the highest levels of child independence, which means their children are responsible and self-reliant. These children are the highest in achievement orientation. That means they want to succeed. These children are the most socially responsible. They perform better in school. They're less hostile and aggressive. They have greater self-esteem and they're more popular with their peers. They're more socially, again, I already said they're more socially responsible, and they just do better in society and around people. They have fewer behavioral problems in adolescence, and their teens lie less to authoritative parents. There's been a lot of studies on how teenagers lie, and essentially teens are going to lie to all their parents no matter what, but authoritative parents encounter less of that. Authoritarian parents have children who are unhappy, have lower self-esteem, they're frequently aggressive. This could be because authoritarian parents are aggressive toward their children, and what children see, they do. They model. They learn that that's how you're supposed to treat other people. They also have less self-control and self-reliance. Remember, authoritarian parents are the ones who control everything their children do. So it kind of seems counterintuitive that these children would have less self-control. But when parents are overly controlling, children don't learn how to control themselves. It's a skill that needs to be practiced, and authoritarian parents never give them the chance to practice. If someone always does something for you, would you ever learn how to do it for yourself? So these children don't know how to control themselves. Children of permissive parents tend to be impulsive, have little self-control, they're entitled. Their parents have let them get away with everything, and so they think that society owes them something. They should be allowed to get away with everything all the time. Children with uninvolved parents do poorly in school. They're more aggressive. These children would obviously have a bad attachment, an insecure attachment to their parents. So all the negatives of insecure attachments would apply here too. This is the worst outcome. Like they said, the worst outcomes are from permissive and uninvolved. So now we're going to talk about some variations in parenting. Parenting styles differ based on the values of the culture. For example, European Americans want their children to be happy and self-reliant, so these parents are usually warm with a moderate level of control. Other countries value collectivism over individualism. In China, for instance, emotional restraint and obedience are values, so parents usually use an authoritarian style. They have little affection and high control. Latino cultures value strong family ties and expect children to respect adults, so they have high warmth and high control, and they're more protective of their children. So when I'm talking to you about parenting, keep in mind that it is for Western cultures. Every culture that has different values would have different styles of parenting, and it doesn't necessarily mean that one is superior over another. It's just what is best for that culture. Now for SES, remember that's socioeconomic status. It's based on a lot of factors such as income, education level, neighborhood, things like that. But you can also think of it as class. In the US, parents of low SES situations tend to be more authoritarian. They're more controlling, they're more punitive with their children in general. And there are several possible reasons for this. Maybe because they have lower income, they're more stressed, and so they result to these different types of parenting. Because they're stressed, they can't be calm with their children. They're also in poor neighborhoods, so there's more danger. So maybe they have to use these more controlling parenting methods in order to keep their children safe. It's also a matter of education. In general, the more educated people are, the quote-unquote better parenting they exhibit. So in low SES, people have low education, which could be another factor. Some other factors in parenting: single parents are also more likely to be authoritarian, probably for a lot of the same reasons as low SES parents. Also, we tend to parent the way we were parented. What was done to us, we tend to do to our children. Have you ever heard someone say, I was spanked and I turned out fine? So parents tend to do to their children what was done to them. Another huge factor is attachment. People who had secure attachments with their parents are more likely to form secure attachments with their children, leading to better parenting practices. There is also some genetic factors. Parental warmth and parental negativity have been found to be influenced by heredity. Some people just find it easier to be warm, supportive, and responsive than other people. So this leads us into the topic of discipline. So parental behavior, there's several different ways for them to discipline their children. So direct instruction. Instead of just giving children commands and expecting them to be followed with no question, parents should use direct instruction. This is telling a child what to do, when, and why. So this direct instruction fits better with authoritative parenting. Instead of just shouting commands, you let children know why you're asking them to do and why it is important. Parents should be coaches, teaching children social and emotional skills such as empathies. For instance, instead of share your toys, talk about how sad someone is when they don't get to play with a toy, or how it's important to play together and get along. These children tend to do better socially and get along better with their peers. Modeling. We talked about this already. Authoritative parents are good role models. The saying, do as I say, not as I do, does not work. Children copy what they see. If you want your children to have manners, you need to model manners. If you yell and hit, your children are going to yell and hit. Feedback. Feedback is how parents tell children if a behavior is acceptable or not. It's done through reinforcement and punishment, just like in operant conditioning. So reinforcement, remember, increases the likelihood of behavior happening again. It might just be praise or rewards for good behavior. You just have to be careful that you're not reinforcing behavior that you actually want to discourage. This is called a negative reinforcement trap. For example, a mother tells a son to do something he doesn't want to do, maybe take out the trash. The son responds by doing something parents don't like, such as ignoring them or complaining. He does that long enough and mother caves in, deciding he doesn't need to take out the trash, and just to get him to stop arguing and whining, she does it herself. The feedback is that the son got rewarded for arguing. So what's going to happen the next time his mother asks him to take out the trash? He's probably going to argue again. So you have to be careful that you're reinforcing the behavior you want, not the behavior you don't want. Punishment. When punishment is used, it should be administered consistently and directly after the undesired behavior. And it should be accompanied by an explanation of why the behavior was bad and why the punishment is happening. It should also be delivered by someone with whom the child has a warm relationship. Some of the drawbacks of punishment is that it typically only stops the behavior temporarily unless the child is given a new behavior to replace the old behavior. For example, punishing brothers for fighting may stop the fight in the moment, but they're likely to fight again unless they've been taught another way to settle their differences. Punishment may have side effects too, such as making the child upset, which makes them miss the feedback that the punishment is trying to convey. They're so upset by the punishment itself, they lose sight of what they're being punished for. This type of feedback is classic behaviorism. Reward good behavior, punish bad behavior. Behaviorism may make sense, and most parents use it, but it is not the most effective way of modifying behavior. Sticker charts even have drawbacks. They can teach children to only do something good if there's a reward for it. So it gets to the point where you ask them to do a chore and they say, what am I going to get for it? Behavior charts can cause shame and self-esteem problems. How would you like it if your boss put up a behavior chart at work so all your coworkers could see it? So before we discuss alternatives to typical behaviorist punishment and rewards, let's talk about punishment in some more depth. So punishment can take on several forms. Physical punishment, so this might be spanking or hitting. If children are punished physically, they are likely to become more aggressive. Harsher forms of physical punishment are associated with aggression, mental health problems, impaired child-parent relationships, and delayed cognitive development. Many countries around the world have banned physical punishment. It's illegal. Spanking does not work. Spanking and yelling are what are called power assertive practices, and they usually occur from the parent's loss of patience. These power assertive practices are not effective. They might be a short-term fix, but not a long-term. They may stop the behavior in the instant, but they don't seem to improve the behavior overall. Instead, the child learns how to just avoid the punishment rather than just correcting their behavior. There are some factors to this. That being said, there are still some experts who say it's not the spanking itself that is bad, but other circumstances around it, such as parents who are harsh or cold or low SES or different SES groups. Some studies have shown that negative effects of physical punishment are not universal across cultures. So again, we're mostly talking about our culture. SES seems to have an effect. So one theory is that in environments where the child's life is in danger, physical punishment serves as a way to teach the child to stay safe, to help keep them alive. For example, if they play in a busy street, their parents spank them and tell them to go inside. In these cases, children see the punishment more as a symbol of protection and love rather than a punishment. So the intent and the emotion of the parent matters. If the parent is angry, they tend to hit harder, and the child picks up on that anger. When spanking is done in a calm manner, however, without anger or frustration, the consequences do not appear to be as dire. Different cultures in SES seem to show different outcomes for spanking, so it's not all bad. It's not black and white. If parents are warm and caring overall, then occasional spanking doesn't have the same negative effects. If spanking is done with the intent to keep the child safe, so if it's done out of love instead of as retribution, done out of anger, we don't see the same negative effects. However, at least in our culture, there are better ways. Spanking is not the best solution. Another punishment frequently used is psychological control. This is a method that uses the child's shame, guilt, and gratitude to control behavior. This is when a parent might lay on a guilt trip. After all I've done for you, or you should be ashamed of yourself, or why can't you be good like your sister? These methods can be just as bad as spanking. They can reduce academic achievement and emotional intelligence. It could also hurt attachment and create resentment. In short, it's just as bad as spanking. So timeouts. Many books talk about using a timeout instead, which is just telling the child to go sit somewhere for a certain amount of time, but they're not very effective either. Punishing a child with social isolation is bad. So there's a correct way to use a timeout. It shouldn't be go to your room and think about what you've done. That doesn't work. Most of the time the child just sits in their room and stews in their own anger. They don't learn anything. So this is how a timeout should go. You should have a safe place for a child to go, maybe a corner of the living room that has some pillows or a blanket, just a safe, calm place. The point of the timeout is to take a few minutes to let the child calm down, and the adult should go there with the child. Once the child and the parent are calm, then you can discuss the behavior. There's no point discussing behavior with an upset child. It does not get through to their brains. An upset child cannot learn no matter how much you lecture them. So now I've told you a lot of things that we shouldn't do when we're punishing our children, and a lot of places just stop with that. You shouldn't spank, you shouldn't yell, but we don't tell parents what they can do instead. So that's what we're going to talk about in the next video.